Morning mist hugged the pine trees in the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. It clung to the forest like a secret that refused to be spoken. Rebecca Stone stood behind her family's log cabin, her hands buried in the cold earth of the small garden. The air smelled of wildflowers and sharp mountain frost, and somewhere far off, a hawk cried as if warning the world. Rebecca was 23, thin from years of hard living, but her eyes stayed bright. They were a deep green that held both tiredness and hope. She wore a faded brown cotton dress with sleeves that brushed her wrists as she pulled weeds from the soil. Her hair was auburn, braided tight, held by a worn ribbon that had seen better days. Behind her, the cabin felt smaller each day. The walls held memories, but also fear. Her father's cough had grown worse. His lungs were ruined from years of breathing in mountain dust while chasing small bits of gold that never seemed to change their luck. Her younger siblings ran barefoot over rocks like they did not know hunger or debt. But Rebecca knew. She knew how the numbers did not add up. She knew the creditors were coming like wolves. That night the wind pressed against the cabin and the fire snapped in the stone hearth. Her father sat close to the warmth, his face lined and gray under the firelight. When he spoke, it sounded like he had to fight for each word. "You'll need to marry someone who can provide," he said. Rebecca did not argue. She could not. The truth sat heavy in her chest. But inside, something rebelled. She did not want to be traded like a sack of flour. She did not want a marriage built only on fear. Later, when the others slept, she sat by candlelight with a borrowed book open in her lap. The flame shook with every draft, and the pages smelled faintly of smoke. She read about cities and railroads and new inventions, and she imagined a life where she was more than a girl trapped behind split-rail fences. Then, the knock came. It was not the timid knock of a neighbor. It was firm, careful, like someone who knew exactly where they stood and still chose respect. Rebecca rose, heart beating faster. Her father reached for the old rifle near the door, even though his hands trembled. When the door opened, a man stood on the porch with snow in his beard and moonlight on his shoulders. He was tall and broad, with a worn leather jacket and canvas trousers marked by honest work. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his blue eyes. Those eyes looked like they had watched storms roll over mountains and never flinched. He removed his hat before speaking. "I've heard of your troubles," he said, his voice deep as a canyon. "I propose marriage to Miss Rebecca." The cabin went silent. Even the fire seemed to quiet. Rebecca's father stared as if he had misheard. You barely know her." The man did not rush. "My name is Caleb Winters. I have land in the high country and the will to build something lasting. I'm not wealthy in gold, but I can give her a home." Rebecca's siblings peered from behind her father's legs, eyes wide. Her father's cough broke the silence again, rough and wet. Rebecca studied the stranger. His clothes were plain, his hands were rough, but there was something in his stillness that felt different from the men in Pine Ridge. Men who bragged loud and promised little. This man spoke like he measured his words. "You want to marry me," Rebecca said carefully. "Why?" Caleb held her gaze. "Because I believe you're stronger than this place has allowed you to be. And because I need someone who can see the truth of a man, not just what others say about him." Her father's eyes narrowed. "And what do we get out of this?" Quote, Caleb's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. "I'll settle your debts. I'll make sure your family has enough for winter. And Rebecca will come with me as my wife, by her choice." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. Debts, winter. The words twisted together like rope around her ribs. If she refused, her family could lose everything. If she accepted, she would walk away from the only life she had known and follow a man she barely understood. For the next days, the settlement of Pine Ridge buzzed. Women whispered after church. Men at the trading post stared too long. Some called Caleb an opportunist. Others said he must be hiding something, because men did not appear from the wilderness offering help without wanting more. Rebecca heard it all. She kept her head down, but her mind stayed awake. Caleb came again, not with pressure, but with patience. They spoke on the porch under star-filled skies. He told her about timber and stone, about seasons that could kill a careless man. He spoke of railroads, too, and how they were cutting across the nation like new veins, carrying people, money, and change. "The world is changing, Rebecca," he told her one night as the wind sighed through the pines. "You can change with it if you're willing to trust." Rebecca watched his face in the starlight. He was not soft, he was not a dream, but he was steady. And somehow, his words made her feel like she had choices, even when life tried to corner her. Then, the creditors arrived from Denver. 2 men on horses rode up to the cabin like they owned the dirt. They spoke to her father with cold smiles and sharp voices. They listed numbers. They mentioned taking the claim, the cabin, even the mule if they had to. That evening, her father looked older than ever. "It's an honest offer," he said to Rebecca. "Better than poverty or the poorhouse." Rebecca went up to her small loft bedroom. One candle flickered beside her bed. The cracked mirror showed a girl with tired eyes and a face that had carried too much for too long. She pressed her fingers to the ribbon in her braid and tried to steady her breathing. She thought of her siblings, thin and hungry. She thought of her father coughing into his sleeve, pretending it was nothing. She thought of the book pages and the world beyond the mountains. And she thought of Caleb's eyes, calm and unreadable, like a lake that hid deep water. At dawn, sunrise painted the peaks gold and crimson. Rebecca stepped onto the porch. Caleb waited beside a wagon loaded with modest supplies. 2 horses stood patiently, steam rising from their nostrils. Her family gathered in the doorway. Relief and sorrow mixed on their faces. Rebecca swallowed hard. Her heart felt like it was being pulled in 2 directions at once. "I accept," she said. Caleb did not shout. He did not boast. He simply nodded, as if honoring the weight of her choice. Then he offered his hand. It was firm and warm. Rebecca climbed into the wagon. As the wheels creaked forward, Pine Ridge fell behind them. The cabin grew smaller. The fences vanished. The trail narrowed into the wilderness. The higher they climbed, the colder the air became. Pine forests thickened. The world turned quiet except for hoofbeats and the steady groan of the wagon. Rebecca wrapped her shawl tighter, but the chill was not only from the mountain wind. It was from the fear she carried inside, what waited for her at the end of this trail. A rough cabin buried in snow, a lonely life with a man she barely knew, a marriage built on survival instead of love. She glanced at Caleb. His eyes stayed forward, focused. But for a moment, his hand tightened on the reins, and she saw it, a flicker of something hidden. Not shame, not doubt, purpose. As the trail climbed toward the clouds, Rebecca realized she had not just married a mountain man. She had stepped into a story she did not understand yet. And somewhere ahead, beyond the last ridge and the deep timberline, Caleb Winters was carrying a secret that could change everything. The mountain trail kept climbing, and each mile pulled Rebecca farther from everything she had ever known. The trees grew taller and closer, and the air turned thin and sharp. At night, the cold pressed against the wagon like a living thing, and the stars looked so near she felt she could touch them. Caleb built small fires with quick hands, and he spoke little, as if every word had weight. 3 days passed that way. Rebecca's body ached from the wooden seat, but her mind stayed awake. She watched Caleb when he thought she was not looking. He moved like a man who belonged to the wilderness, yet there were moments when he spoke with a quiet polish that did not match his rough clothes. Once, when she asked about a book she had read, he answered with the kind of words she had only seen on pages. On the 4th day, they reached a ridge where the wind blew hard and clean. Caleb slowed the horses, and his shoulders stiffened. He did not look at Rebecca right away, but she heard something in his breathing, like he was bracing himself. Then he guided the wagon over the last rise. Rebecca's breath caught. Below them lay a hidden valley, wide and green, even this late in the season. A clear stream ran through it, shining like silver under the pale sun. Aspen trees flamed gold near the water, and dark pines stood like guards along the edges. The place looked untouched, like a secret the mountains had kept. But it was not the valley that stunned her most. A great mansion of logs sat at the center of the meadow, tall and strong, built with care and skill. It rose in levels with wide porches wrapping around it and windows that flashed with light. Stone paths cut through neat gardens. Barns and outbuildings stood nearby, built to match the main house. It was a kingdom hidden in the wild. Rebecca gripped the edge of the wagon seat. "What is this place?" Quote. Caleb kept his eyes on the road as they started down into the valley. His voice came low and steady. "Our home, Winter's Lodge. Our home." The words struck her like a sudden snowfall. She had expected a small cabin, smoke, and hard days. She had not expected this. No simple mountain man owned a place like this. As they rolled closer, a man stepped out from the front porch. He was tall and clean, dressed like someone who worked, but his shirt was pressed and his boots were fine. He moved with purpose, like he had been waiting and knew exactly what to do. "Mr. Winters," he called, relief plain in his voice. "We've been expecting you." "Everything is ready, just as you asked." Rebecca turned her head slowly. "Mr. Winters?" Caleb's posture changed in that moment. It was subtle, but real. His shoulders set, his chin lifted, and the tired woodsman look fell away like an old coat. He nodded at the man as if he had always been in charge. Inside the mansion, Rebecca stepped into a world that felt unreal. The great room rose 2 stories high, warmed by a stone fireplace large enough to stand inside. The walls were hung with fine paintings and woven blankets. The furniture was carved and heavy, made for comfort and wealth. The air smelled of cedar and clean leather. A woman entered with a tray and set down tea in delicate cups. Real porcelain. Rebecca stared at it like it might break just from her looking. She had never held anything like it in Pine Ridge. Caleb led her to sit near the fire. For a moment he stood there, hands open at his sides, as if he did not know where to place them. The silence between them grew thick. "You deserve the truth," he said at last. Rebecca kept her voice calm, though her heart hammered. "Then tell me." His eyes held the firelight, and for the first time she saw fear in him. Not fear of the mountains, but fear of losing her. "My name is Caleb Winters," he said. "I am heir to the Winters timber empire. My father built it, and when he died, it became mine." Rebecca blinked, trying to steady herself. Her mind raced back over every word he had spoken to her on the porch in Pine Ridge, every quiet look, every careful pause. A timber empire, a mansion. This could not be the same man who wore a worn jacket and rode into her life like a stranger. "Why did you hide it?" she asked. Caleb stared into the flames, then back at her. "Because of what it brings. People in Denver do not see a man. They see money. They see power. They see something to take." His voice tightened. "I needed to know if someone could love me without any of that. I needed to know if you would choose the man." Rebecca's throat felt tight. She had married him to save her family, yes, but she had also felt something real, something steady. Now she could not tell where the truth ended and the disguise began. Before she could speak again, the front door opened with force. A woman walked in like she owned the house. She was around 40, wearing a deep blue traveling dress that looked expensive and sharp. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her gray eyes swept over the room and landed on Rebecca with cold judgment. 2 men in city suits followed behind her, their faces serious. "Caleb," the woman said, her voice smooth and hard, "you've returned, and I see you brought company." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Aunt Catherine, this is Rebecca, my wife." Catherine's smile did not reach her eyes. "Your wife," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "We need to speak. Now." Caleb stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Catherine and Rebecca. "Whatever it is can wait." "It cannot," Catherine said, turning to the men behind her like they were proof. "The board has voted." Your little mountain act has gone on long enough. Contracts are waiting. Development plans are waiting. We have an offer that could triple our holdings." Rebecca felt the temperature of the room change. It was not the fire. It was the danger in Catherine's calm voice. Catherine's gaze moved back to Rebecca. "And of course, any irregular choices made during your rustic phase must be reconsidered. The board requires stability, breeding, connections." Rebecca's fingers curled in her lap. She understood the meaning under those words. Catherine was not talking about business alone. She was talking about removing Rebecca like a stain. Caleb's voice cut through the room. "My marriage stands. Rebecca is my choice." Catherine's smile sharpened. "We shall see," she said. "Society in Denver will be less forgiving than a poor little mountain settlement." That night, Rebecca lay awake in a bedroom that felt too soft, too quiet. The bed could not calm her thoughts. Through the window, she saw moonlight on snow and the dark shape of trees. This beautiful place already felt like a cage with golden bars. In the morning, she wandered the hall and heard voices from behind a half-open door. Catherine's voice, low and sharp, sliced through the air. "She is completely unsuitable," Catherine said. "No name, no dowry, no training. The wives in Denver will tear her apart." Rebecca pressed her palm to the wall, feeling her pulse in her fingertips. Caleb's voice answered, tight with anger. "I will not trade Rebecca like property." Catherine replied without mercy. "Sentiment will ruin you. You will lose everything your father built." Rebecca's stomach turned. She could have backed away. She could have hidden and cried. She could have let them decide her worth like a piece of land. Instead, she stepped forward and knocked once on the doorframe. The room fell silent as she entered. Catherine turned, surprised, then amused. "Oh," she said softly, "the girl speaks." Rebecca stood tall. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "It seems my marriage is being judged," she said, "so I will speak for myself." Catherine lifted her chin. "This is business. If you truly care for Caleb, you will accept what is best for him." Rebecca looked from Catherine to the papers on the desk, then back again. "What is best for him is not a woman who smiles in a ballroom," she said. "What is best for him is someone who will stand beside him when people threaten his home." Caleb's eyes fixed on Rebecca, and she felt his surprise like heat. She had not planned her words. They simply came from a place inside her that had been tired of bowing her whole life. Catherine's expression cooled. "Then let us test you," she said. "The governor's reception in Denver is next week. Attend with him. Let society judge what you are." After Catherine left the room, Rebecca and Caleb stood alone. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. It carried truth. Caleb spoke softly. "You do not have to face them." Rebecca lifted her chin. Her fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. "Yes, I do," she said. "If they want to see what kind of woman you married, then they will." Caleb reached for her hand, and this time his touch felt honest, not part of any act. "Then we face them together," he said. Rebecca stared out the window toward the distant line of mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks was Denver, full of strangers with sharp smiles and sharper plans. She did not know if they would break her, or if she would break through them. But she knew one thing. The next road they took would decide not only her place in Caleb's life, but whether their love could survive the world that wanted to tear it apart. The road to Denver felt like a different world from the high country. The coach rolled down from wild peaks into open land where fences ran straight and towns sat close together. Rebecca watched the mountains fade behind them, and she felt both loss and strength. Up there, the wind did not care who was rich or important. Down here, people did. When Denver finally appeared, it looked busy and hungry. Streets were packed with wagons and riders. Brick buildings stood beside rough wooden ones, like the city was still deciding what it wanted to be. Telegraph wires stretched overhead like thin spider webs, carrying words faster than any horse could run. Their coach stopped in front of the Brown Palace Hotel. The building rose high and proud, filled with gaslight and polished stone. Rebecca stepped down beside Caleb, her boots touching clean pavement instead of dirt. She wore a forest green gown that fit her like it had been made for her life, not for someone else's dream. It was fine enough for Denver, but it still felt like her. Inside, the lobby buzzed with voices and perfume. Men in suits laughed like they owned the future. Women in silk looked Rebecca up and down as if measuring her worth with their eyes. Rebecca held her head steady, but her heart beat hard. Caleb leaned close. "They see only the surface," he murmured. "You see the truth." Rebecca nodded once. She did not know all the rules here, but she knew how to survive. She had survived hunger. She had survived fear. She had survived winters that tried to kill her family. She would survive this too. The ballroom was bright with chandeliers and mirrors. Music floated through the air, soft and smooth, hiding sharp conversations underneath. When Rebecca entered on Caleb's arm, heads turned like a wave. Whispers ran through the room, and she could feel them following her like cold fingers. A servant announced them, and people stepped aside. Caleb moved with calm authority, greeting men who looked powerful and pleased to see him. Rebecca realized then that Caleb was not just rich, he was important in a way that made others listen. Catherine appeared quickly, dressed in deep burgundy and shining beads. She looked perfect, like a weapon wrapped in beauty. Beside her stood a tall man with silver hair and a hard smile. "Caleb," Catherine said, sweet as sugar and just as sharp. "And Rebecca. How rustic you look this evening." Rebecca met her gaze. "Thank you," she said calmly. "I find strong things last longer than delicate ones." The silver-haired man gave a short bow. "Randolph Blackwood," Catherine said. "Colorado Mountain Development Company. We have been trying to help Caleb make wise choices for the future." Blackwood's eyes skimmed Rebecca as if she were a chair placed in the wrong room. "Mrs. Winters," he said, voice smooth. "Surely someone with your limited background understands the value of development, prosperity, jobs, progress." Rebecca heard the trap. He wanted her to agree like a quiet wife, then smile at her own small thinking. She felt the room listening. Catherine's face stayed calm, but her eyes waited for a mistake. Rebecca did not give one. "I understand prosperity," Rebecca said. "My family lived without it, but I also understand mountains." She looked at Blackwood directly. "Have you walked the high country after a clear cut? Have you seen what happens when spring water turns brown and a creek changes its path? Have you watched an avalanche take down trees like they were matchsticks?" Blackwood's smile tightened. "Business plans are made with numbers, not stories." Rebecca nodded as if he had proven her point. "Then your numbers should include what the mountains will do when they are pushed too hard. The land always collects its debt." A murmur passed through the nearby guests. It was not laughter, it was interest. Before Blackwood could answer, a man stepped forward with a warm voice and a politician's smile. "Mrs. Winters," he said, "I have been hoping to meet you." It was Governor Pierce. Catherine went still. The governor shook Rebecca's hand like she mattered. "Caleb speaks highly of your knowledge of mountain communities. We need voices like yours if we want Colorado to grow without destroying itself." Blackwood's face changed. Catherine's fingers tightened on her fan. Rebecca felt the shift in the room like a door opening. People leaned in. Men who had been ready to dismiss her now looked curious. Rebecca spoke with care, using simple words but firm truth. She talked about timber crews and winter roads. She talked about families who worked the land and deserved safety. She talked about building profit that could last, not profit that burned the future to stay warm for one night. Catherine tried to pull the conversation back into her control, but it slipped away from her like sand. Rebecca could see it in Catherine's eyes. This was not going as planned. Then another woman entered, bright as a jewel in the crowd. Ellen Vanderbilt. She was blonde, smooth, dressed in expensive silk, wearing jewelry that could feed Rebecca's old homestead for years. She moved with easy confidence and walked straight to Caleb, as if she had always believed she belonged at his side. "Caleb, darling," Ellen said, offering her gloved hand. "Father has been hoping you would reconsider our railroad contract." Then Ellen looked at Rebecca with a polite smile that held no warmth. "And you must be the little mountain flower everyone has been whispering about." Rebecca felt heat rise in her chest, but she did not let it show. She had learned long ago that anger used poorly was a gift to an enemy. Rebecca smiled gently. "It's nice to meet you," she said. "I've heard railroads can change a place forever. The question is whether they change it for the people living there, or only for the people collecting money." Ellen blinked, not expecting that. Rebecca turned slightly toward Governor Pierce, keeping her voice calm. "Governor, earlier you mentioned new proposals for watershed protection. If those pass, it will affect where rail lines can be built safely. I'd like to hear your thoughts." Quote, "In one smooth move, Rebecca changed the subject from gossip to policy. The men around them followed, because power always follows what matters." Ellen was left holding her perfect smile, suddenly with less air to breathe. Catherine watched all of it, and Rebecca could feel her building toward something desperate. Near the end of the night, when the orchestra played softer and the crowd thinned, Catherine made her move. She returned with an older man carrying a leather folder. "Caleb," Catherine said, too bright, "I'd like you to meet Judge Morrison. He has been reviewing some family documents." The judge opened the folder slowly, like he enjoyed the moment. "Mr. Winters," he said, "your father's will includes provisions that require board approval for any marriage that could affect the company's legal standing. The board has voted that your union was formed without proper notice. The legality is questionable." Rebecca's stomach turned cold. The words hit like a slap. This was not just insult now. This was a knife aimed at her marriage. Guests nearby pretended not to listen, but their eyes were fixed on the scene. Catherine stood very still, ready to watch Rebecca fall. Rebecca took a slow breath. She stepped forward. "May I see the document?" she asked. Judge Morrison looked amused, but he handed it over. Rebecca read carefully. She did not rush. She had learned to read deeds and claims when her father could not. She had learned that one wrong line could ruin a family. The room held its breath while she studied the paper. Then Rebecca looked up. "That is interesting," she said softly. "Judge, this section speaks about board approval for marriages that could weaken the estate." She turned a page. "But it also speaks about contribution." The judge's smile faded a little. Rebecca looked toward Governor Pierce. "Governor, under territorial law, does contribution include public service and official standing?" The governor's brows lifted. "Yes," he said, voice clear. "Appointments and public roles carry legal standing." Rebecca nodded as if she had expected it, because she had. "Then this matter is settled," Rebecca said. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Rebecca's hands did not shake now. "Today, before this reception," she said, "the governor's office confirmed my appointment as a territorial advisor for Mountain Community Relations." The papers were sent ahead by telegraph. The governor turned slightly to a servant, and within minutes an envelope was brought forward. He opened it and showed the seal to the judge without drama. The judge stared at it, then cleared his throat. "That would change the legal standing," he admitted. Catherine's face went pale, then hard. She looked like a woman who had run out of roads. Caleb stepped beside Rebecca, his voice quiet but strong. "You tried to take my wife from me," he said to Catherine. "Now you will stop." Catherine's lips tightened. For a moment, she looked as if she might speak, but no words came that could save her. She turned and walked away, leaving Judge Morrison to gather his papers like a man who suddenly wished he were elsewhere. When the last notes of the music faded, Caleb and Rebecca stood together under the bright lights. The room felt different now, not because Rebecca had become one of them, but because she had made them see her. Later, on the balcony of their hotel room, Denver's lights flickered below like a restless fire. The air was cold, but Rebecca felt steady. Caleb took her hands. "You planned that," he said, awe in his voice. "I prepared," Rebecca answered. "The moment your aunt threatened our marriage, I knew we could not live by hoping she would stop. We had to be stronger than her." Caleb pulled her close, and for the first time since Pine Ridge, Rebecca felt fully safe in his arms. They returned to Winter's Lodge with the mountains greeting them like old friends. The valley looked brighter than before, not because it changed, but because Rebecca had changed. She was no longer a guest there. She was not a rescued girl. She was the woman of the house and a partner in everything Caleb was building. In the years that followed, the lodge became more than a mansion hidden in the wild. It became a place people came to for help and guidance. Timber workers had better homes. Children had a school. Families had a doctor who rode out in winter, when storms tried to cut them off from the world. Rebecca and Caleb had children of their own, and laughter-filled rooms that once held only quiet secrets. Some nights, when the wind howled through the pines, Rebecca sat by the fire with Caleb beside her and listened to that wild sound. It reminded her of who she had been and what she had survived. Catherine never returned to rule the lodge. Her power faded in the face of Rebecca's steady strength and Caleb's clear choice. The mountains kept what they honored. Rebecca had once dreamed of escaping her life. Instead, she stepped into a larger one. She found love where she expected only sacrifice. She found purpose where others wanted her small. And in a valley guarded by stone and sky, she built something that no one could take from her. Not with money, not with law, and not with cruelty.